What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be going over 6 solid tips for you as a player to help reach infinite. Even if you are an infinite player, these tips are still essential and still helpful for those that may or may not know of them. These are some things that I help people with all the time, and I wanted to express this in a video because I get asked a lot, how do I know certain things or how do I go about certain things? And I wanted to make a video basically establishing that and to help you out. Disclaimer though, this video is not at all intended to attack other YouTubers or any kind of sort of information at all. I always say, look at other YouTubers, watch streams, get familiarized, and do your homework. Always do your homework and know what's out there. With that being said though, before we get started, I notice a lot of my viewers are not subscribed. It takes me a long time to make these videos, and I just want to say, please, if you guys can, hit that subscribe button and like button. It would go a long way to help me on the algorithm. I take a lot of time out of my day to make these videos to help people grow, and yeah. But yeah, let's go ahead, get right into these tips and tricks, and we'll go from there. Tip number 1, evaluating your opponent's deck very early on. You have to think of every card that they play in a somewhat tree skill format. Certain cards will lead more information as time goes on, and you will have a further and better grasp early on what your opponent's playing. This is going to be one of the helpful and most determining factors as to if you are going to win a game or not, based on your strengths in your decks and with their strengths. For instance, if someone plays a Bucky Barn, you will tend to think that it's going to be a death deck of some sort. If they play a Yondu, you will notice that it could still fall under the same kind of deck, or it can start falling into other things, like, for instance, a Galactus deck. If you start to see certain things like Wave or Electro, you will kind of start to see, in terms of knowing what is out there in terms of the meta, you will start to think, okay, well, those are popular cards. You will start thinking Galactus as well. But for instance, if you start seeing things early on in the game like a Quinjet, your mind will essentially race upon a lot of things like, what are they playing? These are some really easy ways to understand what they're doing. You will immediately think it's a Dino deck, or it might be a current meta deck like Thanos. Easy way to check these type of things is check your opponent's hands, check what their number count is on their deck, and that in alone will let you know if they have a Thanos in their deck or if it's something normal like a Devil Dino. Understanding the early game presence will help you grow as a player and to understand yourself and familiarize yourself with other decks. Tip number 2, understanding your deck's strengths and weaknesses based on your opponent's decks. While you are still evaluating their deck, you have to understand if your deck is good against that particular type of deck. Understanding where your tempo, if your deck is, say, for instance, a control or a late game deck or an early game deck, you have to understand where your strengths lie against other things. This is going to come in time. This is more of a trial and error. You have to gain that experience by doing in order to gain more knowledge on the game. I can't express to you how often I get asked this, well, how do I know if my deck is strong against this deck? You just have to understand, you have to do your homework. It's a big part of this game. Knowing and exposing yourself to other situations is only going to help you out further. Tip number 3, understanding when you have lost a lane, and learn to invest in other lanes and prioritize those over the others. For instance, we're going to take into consideration a couple of different things. 1, when you've lost a lane, you have to understand what is in your hand, what is the deck that they're playing. For instance, if they run a Storm, you need to understand, do I have anything to invest into that lane? Or do I just say ditch that lane and go for something else? If you know you have something very strong, play something there. If you don't know what they're going to play, you always have to think what usually follows up after certain cards. Knowing these types of situations and knowing and to evaluate these things will help you, because you only have 6 turns in a game. If you invest certain cards into certain lanes, you're sometimes going to lose the ability to have the not only element of surprise, but you invested too much and spreaded yourself too thin. For instance, if someone plays a Wong, sometimes you may want to contest that lane with more power. Know that you can contest these things because Wong is more of a support card and not necessarily something that's going to put out a lot of power, unless you know they're running, for instance, a Black Panther. Understanding your deck and what they're trying to run based on what they're telegraphing, it will tell you if you should invest into those lanes now or to ditch them. Another one, for instance, is a card like Dracula. Dracula is a card that you sometimes can never figure out if you can or cannot contest that. And a lot of people, and I notice a lot of people tend to just like want to contest them thinking that, oh, I've won this lane. There's no way he's going to have that RNG and pull, an infinite. Most people that play certain cards will recognize and understand their decks, and you need to respect that. If you don't respect that, they will legitimately beat you because you didn't respect them. Most people that play a card like Dracula understand that you can't get Shang-Chi'd, you can't get Enchantress. Nothing's going to stop you from that card. For instance, they will make sure that they have built their decks around certain cards, and they will beat you because you did not respect that, and they knew to keep one card in their hand at the end of the game. Tip number 4, understand when you need to retreat. Sometimes you don't need to finish these games out. Finishing your games out will lead you more to losing than to winning. You can't always gamble every game that you play, and you can't always finish out every game. I can't express to you, an infinite player tends, from what I've noticed, they tend to have a bigger loss to win ratio because they take small losses and they gain big wins. You need, as a player, to evaluate the decks that you're going up against and know when they have a card in their hand and when you have the cards in your hand, and know how is that outcome really going to be. For instance, if you know that they're playing a discard Hela deck, you need to respect the fact that they may just have that. If they snap, they have the Hela in hand. You need to recognize these things, and I can't emphasize how often this is more of a you problem and not your opponent's problem. You lost a game and you beat yourself up after because you decided that, oh, I have all the power on the board, he doesn't have Hela. Respect it. But I'm telling you right now, you need to respect your opponent a lot more and give your opponent a lot more credit than you may think. And know that how is that outcome really going to come out to at the end of the day. Tip number 5. This is a very, and I mean very important tip to understand. Looking at your hand and deck number and knowing and remembering what's in your deck, and the same thing goes for your opponent. Looking at their deck and how many cards they have in their hand. This is going to be a deciding factor sometimes on turn 5 and 6 to understand how many cards can they play on that turn. How many cards can you play on that turn? At the same time, what do you have left in your deck, and what do they have left in their deck? Based on recognizing what deck they typically play, you have to understand, are they going to be able to contest one lane based on only having one card in hand, except for situations like White Tiger or Dr. Doom? That comes into play with recognizing what their deck is. Or, have you won 2 lanes? He can only contest so many. These will give you actually, an insight of when you can and cannot snap on certain things too. This is so important, and I don't see anyone ever doing this. Understanding, for instance, if you play against a deck like a Lockjaw, find out deck trackers or applications that will help you remember things as well. Having the insight of knowing what has been discarded throughout the entire game, what has been played, what has been destroyed. These are helpful things that you need to constantly be thinking about throughout the entire game. If you do not do these things, I'm telling you this right now, you are legitimately helping your opponent win because he might be doing this to you. And, turn 6, if he's got a lot of cards in hand and you know that he has a lot of cards in hand, if he's got a mixed or negative and things like that, know that they're going to be dropping a full hand, or they're going to be dropping a lot of cards. These are important tips that you need to constantly remember. If you don't, get on your PC and play, download things like deck trackers like untapped.gg or things like that. These are going to help you at the end of the day. Tip number 6, new and hot locations. This one, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I've gained so many levels based on trying to learn to be friends with a new and hot location versus hating it. If you hate a location, you're going to just be losing, and you're telling yourself, oh, maybe I should just not play for the next 2 days. No. Try to learn to play with new locations. Build decks around new locations that you think are going to help you. look up YouTube videos, do your research, try to find, popular YouTubers that are going to give you really good information about decks that are going to help you during those days. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you learn to play and to be friends with hot new locations, you will level up so much more significantly, because so many people will try to play a top tier deck during a new location, and it's not going to help that deck at all. You will notice that once those new locations are gone, people will resort back to the old, current meta decks, and that's fine. I'm going to share an experience during the Altar of Death location. I actually gained around nearly 15, almost to 20 levels in the course of 2 days. I went from like 75 to like 91. And I basically played nothing but this turn 3 professor deck that I found on YouTube, or I did some research for. And I just learned that, instead of hating that location and playing a deck that I wanted to play, sometimes playing the off decks that are just, hot and new during that time, it's going to help you level up. And if you can learn to coincide with these, you're going to have a much better time on your grind. And then once that location's done, just go back to the deck that you were playing that was working for you. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, these are my tips, guys. I hope that these were really helpful for you. If you guys find or found any of these tips really helpful, leave it in the comments below and let me know that they were helpful. If you guys think that maybe I didn't cover something that you would have liked me to cover, leave it in the comments. I'm always open to insight. This video did take me quite a long time to make and to edit. If you guys can, please leave a comment or a like and subscribe. That would mean the world to me. It takes me so much and so much work to make these things for you guys. But yeah, that being said, guys, I will catch you guys in the next one, and peace.